Everybody calls me Bill. I was born March of 29th of 1916 in Lincoln, Nebraska. Everybody tells me, who knew me as a child, that I was very rambunctious, always getting into trouble, but I was a beautiful boy. Everybody tells me that. But there's an old saying that after you've reached the peak, which I have, there's only one way to go. You go downward, you get ugly. Well, actually, let me start from the time I was a baby. I was always energetic, very energetic, always get into problems and so forth. And when I used to eat, I always had a tendency of pouring food on my head along with soup. And it used to drive my mother nuts. But I can't blame her. Well, I grew up as any normal boy would do, always getting into trouble. I was raised with a group of approximately 9 boys, and we were very close together in our neighborhood at 2055 S Street in Lincoln. We were always playing pranks upon the neighbors, and a couple of the neighbors moved out of the neighborhood, and I don't know why. But one in particular is a man by the name of Wilson. He used to call the cops on us because we were always a little too boisterous. So on one Valentine Day, we let his horse out of the stall, and while he was hunting the stall in the neighborhood, we disassembled his wagon and assembled a wagon on top of his house. 2 weeks later, he was out of the neighborhood, and again, I don't know why. What's the matter, Ben? I used to be a mean little scrapper. Even though I was small, I never lost a fight. I used to love to pick on the bullies of the neighborhood. 2 of them were big, much bigger than me, and 2 were just about my size. They used to pick on the little children, and that used to really infuriate me. God, I used to get mad. Another thing, Lincoln was a hotbed of the Klan at that time, the Ku Klux Klan. The dividing line was South 10th Street. Being as I was raised in Lincoln, I knew the ins and outs of it. So we used to gang up on the children of the Klan. Never lost a fight. God, we used to love that. Well, lo and behold, I grew up. Then we moved out of the neighborhood. Went to North 27th Street. Bought a house there. We didn't stay there very long, because from there we sold a house and we moved to a house on South 21st Street. That was my greatest experience. We were not too far, from the downtown area. My father was not of means, but we always managed to have plenty of food on our table, and at the same time, He supported his sister that had 8 children with food also. He was always very generous. My mother was a beautiful soul, but very domineering. When she barked, everybody bowed. She ran the roost. My father come from Romania, and he used to make wine. He used to make approximately about 50 gallons of wine a year. Our house smelled like a brewery, but the wine was good. He used to give about 5 gallons to the mayor of the city, chief of police, the chief of the fire department, and so forth. And they all called him Load Benny. When I was 13, I had a very, very strong desire to go to the University of Nebraska. It means I had no means financially, neither did my father. I had to devise a means of getting funds. I was always enterprising and very aggressive. So I fixed up a little wagon. It was a red wagon in order to carry ice cream and candy bars. I went to a wholesale confectionery store, which was very close to the downtown area, and they extended me credit. Why, I don't know, but they did. Now I had ice cream, frozen candy bars, and the like. I arranged with 3 stores downtown, all on one block. One was Ben Simons and Sons. There was a ladies' ready-to-wear store right next to it, and a Vera's Hot Shop. At that particular time, stores did not close at 4:30. They would close about 6:30, 7 o'clock, because they wanted the business. So again, I arranged at those stores at their break to go in and sell candy bars, ice cream, and so forth, and I did very well, extremely well. But that wasn't enough. My little brother, who was 3.5 years my junior, used to push a wagon. And when I used to go into the stores, I used to swipe candy bars, ice cream, and so forth. As a result, I lost. But that's just the name of the game. I arranged with the authorities at the University of Nebraska. Again, I tell you this, I was very enterprising, very aggressive. They allowed me to go into the Coliseum, where the ROTC students were drilling, and at their break, well, I had a good deal. I used to sell all my wares all the time, always. And when I used to go home, my mother always had a hot meal for us, loving tenderness, very caring. I would always give my parents 1/2 of what I earned. At that particular time, I was probably earning a little bit more than my father. Because again, as I said before, I used to sell a lot of wares. Well, being I had that very strong desire, I grew up, again, as I said before, I had a bad trait. Again, I was always energetic, getting into trouble and like. I would never steal, lie, or cheat. And those are three attributes of me that I have. And I feel they were very excellent attributes. Grade-wise, I was always in the top 5% of grade school, junior high, and high school. I never made below a grade of an A. Never. Most of the time it was an A+. So I knew that my entrance into the university was no problem. I grew up and I graduated from school, and I wanted so bad to go to the university. So I arranged with 3 stores downtown to clean up the stores, sweep the sidewalk, help with window trimming and the like, and I got paid very good money. Very good money. Again, as I said before, I made more money than my father. And I would always give them part, always. I would buy my own clothes, pay for my own entertainment and the like. But I couldn't take full courses at the university, whereby it used to take approximately 4.5 years to graduate from school. At that particular time, it had took me 5.5 years. But I joined ROTC, and I was very, very good in drilling, use of a rifle and the like. I became a company commander. I was on the drill team, and so forth. When I graduated from school, and my chief subject was fine arts, I had a minor degree in business administration. Bozell and Jacobs, Mr. Jacobs, saw my samples, my art samples, and he said, I want to hire you. But he said, being you're an ROTC, you got to serve 1 year's active duty. So he says, when you get out, see me again and I'll hire you. Just like that. I was assigned to the 25th Infantry, which is in Fort Huachuca, Arizona, right at the base of the Huachuca Mountains, approximately 80 miles from Tucson, Arizona. There's a desert there, and you're approximately 50, 60 miles from the Arizona-Mexican border. I became the Battalion S4 for the 3rd Battalion. There were 4 staff officers in the battalion. As I said before, I became the Battalion S4. I had charge of transportation and equipment. I had charge of the motor pool and the like. One day, I got a special delivery letter, and from the upper left-hand corner, the envelope stated, "From the office of the President of the United States." It was a personal letter written to me by the President himself, and this is the truth, stating that he would like me to put up a dummy landing strip near the base. There was a threat of a German invasion across the Arizona-Mexican border at that particular time. Well, I read up a pamphlet on camouflage, and I learned the ins and outs of it. They assigned me a platoon of men. The theory of camouflage at that particular time was that if you cast a shadow, and the burlap will cast a shadow, it will simulate the real thing. The pursuit ship that was being used at that particular time was a P-38. It was a twin fuselage. I drew up plans and the like, and sure enough, I put up a dummy landing strip. And I was told by pilots from the Tucson Air Base that it looked like the real thing. We used to move, the dummy planes around and so forth. I had a dummy hangar. I had a dummy maintenance shop and the like. Well, we had personnel there because we're always moving around, and from the air, we looked like the real thing. We would have to wave off planes from the Tucson Air Base trying to land there. One day, they sent a plane, landed a plane there, and I was told to go up and to look at my project. Well, I told the pilot, I says, I've got a very queasy stomach. It'd be very easy on me. The pilot didn't obey me. So you can imagine what happened. Right in the cockpit. He come down. I got out of the plane, and for practically all day, I was sick to my stomach. He did whirly-whirp, barrel rolls and the like. And I said, "Stop it, will you?" I said, you're making me sick. And he didn't. So he suffered the consequence. After that happened, we used to go on maneuvers. And I became an umpire. When you're an umpire, you're assigned a CNR, a command and reconnaissance car, and you're assigned 3 men to carry the flags. One a white flag, one a red flag, that's for the red forces, and one a blue flag, that's for the blue forces. And I would have to umpire the red and the blue forces. We were near Camp Livingston at the time, which is very near New Orleans. Well, that's all lowland there, and there are floods. Nobody told me this. But fortunately, I picked a knoll of a hill, and we bivouacked. Bivouac means that you sleep. When I got up in the morning, we were completely surrounded by water. Completely. And we had to wait until the water receded at low tide. And then we got out of there. That was one of my experiences. Another experience, I went on a hike in the Huachuca Mountains with a platoon of men. No, it was the entire battalion. It was the 3rd Battalion. A regiment is made of 4 battalions. And this is the oldest regiment in the United States. It dates as far back as cowboy and Indian days. It's a 25th Infantry. There used to be a fort there, walls and the like. So we went up in the mountains, and it was pitch dark. I slipped on some pebbles, and I rolled down the mountainside. Down a side of a small cliff. I banged my left side up against a boulder, injured my hip and my back, and I was carried back to the hospital. That was one time I was injured. No sooner did we get back to camp on our next march, Colonel Davis, the commander of the regiment, orders an alert. On an alert, everybody is involved, even those who went on an encampment, which we did. So we had to hike 16 miles over a hot desert with full pack, carrying our rifles, full pack and the like. Being my men had already hiked up in the mountains, they were tired. They were all worn out. And they were dropping out of ranks like flies. I remembered I carried about 3 rifles along with my pack and so forth. And lo and behold, we get to our destination point. At that time, Colonel Davis had a little pity on us and ordered us some trucks that takes us back to camp. My feet were a solid mass of blisters. We changed socks and so forth. When I went to Camp Bend, before I went to camp, I had 3 days to leave. I was greatly infatuated with Rose. Now, you met her. And I asked her to marry me. And she did. We couldn't take a vacation because I didn't have enough time. So our honeymoon was in the Row Motel. We went to various places in Omaha. I went to Lincoln and so forth, where my parents lived. And I said, when I leave, I said, I promise you, I will call for you. And no sooner did I get to the 25th Infantry, and I was made a staff officer. That allowed me freedom of travel. I wasn't ordered to stay on a base at all. So I went to Bisbee, Arizona, which is approximately 60 miles from camp. And a very elderly couple, a very sweet couple, took Rose and I in, and they treated us just like one of their children. And it was a beautiful thing. There was a commissary in town where we could buy food and clothing and the like, and that's where we did buy it. And we also subsidized the elderly couple. I was always very good-hearted, always. From there, we moved out. Oh, by the way, I bought a 37 Ford. It was a Ford coupe that had a rumble seat. When we traveled, we knew where every box was to go and so forth, and it was always loaded. We moved to a place approximately 15 miles from camp. While there, we became very dear friends with two other couples, the Garretsons and the Nelsons. The Garretsons and us rented an adobe house made out of straw and mud. Tarantulas were crawling on the floor. The bugs were on the floor. The wives were terrified and so forth. So we didn't stay there long. I was able to rent a trailer, again about 15 miles from camp. I don't think the trailer was any more than about a 12-foot long, very tight, but my wife never complained. Never once did she complain. She tried with all of her being to adapt to every situation, which she did. When I took that hike, and like I said before, I got back to camp, I was dead tired, feet full of blisters. I go to the trailer, and I planked down on a bed, and I slept 24 hours. I was that exhausted. I got up, the wife cared for me and the like, fed me, and that was great. We used to attend battalion parties. In fact, I was ordered by the battalion commander to attend these parties. Why? He had a liking for Rose. She was a very cute girl. She was a beautiful girl. She could dance real good, so forth. And this colonel, who was a drunken slut, he was a former shoe salesman, took a liking to her, and he used to hog her on the floor. But I could do nothing about it. After all, I was on orders. Then it came time to leave. We had a big battalion. When I went on maneuvers, and certain maneuvers I had to go with the troops. I couldn't travel with my wife. The wives would always get together, and they would travel in one convoy home. Because the maneuvers invariably took 2 hours. The wives would travel a distance from Arizona all the way back. And it's quite a distance from Arizona to Omaha. Rose would always travel with the Garretson and take what necessary things that she needed. And she'd always drive back alone. And after all, it's mountainous, and she was frightened, very, very frightened, by the mountains and the lake. She drove over deserts and lake, never complained once. I repeat, never complained once. She was a real fine person. And lo and behold, we were ordered overseas. We had a regimental party. It was at Camp Livingston. Each battalion had their own party. The 3rd party had their own. The other battalions had their own party. The women dressed up in their formals and the like. We dressed up in our Class A uniform, which is highly polished boots, beautiful boots, spurs, not with the prongs or anything, the saber, and a Sam Browne belt. Women, as I said before, are dressed in their formals, and they look beautiful. We bought them flowers and the like, and they wore them. We had our rip-roaring time. My father-in-law came to Camp Livingston, that's to escort his daughter home while I was going overseas, and I thought that was a fine thing. We went overseas, and we went to the island of Bermuda where the convoy formed. It was a Navy ship convoy. Our ship was the SS Peter J. McGuire. It was a New Liberty ship. The convoy was mostly composed of New Liberty ships. I took a 3-day pass. I went into Bermuda proper, and it was very fortunate I did. I toured all of Bermuda, which is a very beautiful place, a place for tourists. They have the Blue Grotto there. I don't know if anybody has ever heard of it. The Blue Grotto is an undersea cave, and the only access to it is at low tide. So you had to go in by boat. It was a gorgeous cave. It was a big cave. Beautiful colors, beautiful coral. The color was all shades of color. Gorgeous. Stalactites, stalagmites, and the like. Those are salt deposits dripping from the ceiling or building up from the floor, always in a cone. Well, we got out at about 3 o'clock because that's when high tide was supposed to come in. We went back to our ship, and the convoy started. We had a very heavy screen of destroyers, cruisers, and the like. It was a big convoy. Like I said before, it was a Navy ship convoy. I would say that there was approximately 60 ships carrying troops. 20 ships were combat boats, destroyers and cruisers. We were very heavily screened. One night I was made the MP on duty. I wore the MP brassard. It was pitch dark. A submarine pack, a German pack, sneaked past the screen, and they got in the center of the convoy. And they shot torpedoes in all directions. I could see from a distance ships burning. ships going down and the like. At that night, while I was at the railing, I noticed what looked like a porpoise coming towards the ship, and I knew it was a torpedo. I yelled torpedo and I ran the opposite side of the ship. Fortunately, the torpedo glanced off the side of the ship. It didn't hit with the nose, because if it did, it would explode. It glanced off on the side, circled around and hit the ship a second time. Again, we were lucky. The nose didn't hit, it just glanced off and then went along its way. I read the ship's records. It stated that the ship was hit by a dead torpedo twice. We landed at Oran, which is a big port in Morocco, North Africa. It's just below the Rock of Gibraltar. You could see the Rock of Gibraltar. We had to go through some straits before you left the Atlantic into the Mediterranean. Like I said before, we landed at Oran. At that particular time, I was still a camouflage officer. I had a camouflage outfit. Actually, it was a camouflage company. We stayed in Oran for a while, and we had a lot of trouble with the prostitutes. Oran was absolutely infested with them, full of disease and the like, so we had to screen off the neighborhood. I was ordered to put up dummy installations there, all in burlap. Dummy ammunition dumps, dummy signal corps, dummy ordnance corps, and so forth. It looked real. You know, from the sky. A Junkers 88, a photographic plane, used to fly over the area all the time, taking photographs. And that was the object of the assignment. From there we went up through Port Arthur, which is a small port. That was controlled by the Seabees. From there we went up to Mostaganem. Mostaganem is very near the Moroccan-Algerian border. It was a pest hole, full of mosquitoes and the like. We became bitten horribly by mosquitoes. I would say approximately 30% of my men and myself come down with a bad case of malaria. Again, I had to go to the hospital. Stayed there. Malaria never leaves your body. It stays in parts of your body for the rest of your life. We went to Algiers And we stayed there for a while. We went to various places in Algiers, and that itself was very, very interesting, extremely interesting. From there we were ordered out to Tunis, Fairfield, and Bizerte, Tunisia. I remember balloons were in the sky. That's the trap plane, German planes. And that was at the time of Rommel. I was assigned for a while with the British First Army, doing some sand camouflage for them. I stayed to only the time that we were clobbered in a pass. And we were clobbered. There was a lot of casualties. We suffered no casualties, but the British did. It was so hot there that the coolest place was in the cab of a truck. And we used to strip off our shirts. And we would pour water over our head, down our bodies. The temperature there on the desert was 132 degrees. We were ordered back to Algiers. My company was not a camouflage company anymore. We became an infantry company. I got heavier equipment, armament and the like. Nothing elaborate. And we went across the Mediterranean. We used to go across on LCTs, that's landing craft tanks, LCM, landing craft men, and so forth. I have photographs of all this. I have actual photographs. I would say that I have a book of approximately an inch thick. All actual photographs I've taken. And they're authentic. We landed at Ajaccio, Corsica. Corsica is the home of Napoleon Bonaparte. It's a big port, but we landed during an air raid. We left the ship in a hurry. We went in the hills. I had some casualties. I had one blonde sergeant die on my arm. A very nice young man. He made a death wish that his allotment not go to his mother. Oh, to not go to his wife, but to go to his mother, because his wife was unfaithful to him. I started the ball rolling. I got the papers forwarded, and sure enough, that request was honored. His allotment went to his mother and not to his wife. I got replacements there, and I was stationed for a while in a Hotel Napoleon Bonaparte. At that particular time, there's a group of Italian soldiers who used to infiltrate the German lines in order to gain information. They could speak Italian, so that was no problem. They used to tell me stories and so forth, and there was quite interesting. I went tip to tip, end to end on the Isle of Corsica. Ajaccio, Corte, Bastia, Rus. At the south end of the island, which is all mountainous, if you went up on top of the mountain, you could see the coastline of southern France. One day I was invited by a French garrison that was on the south side there to come up and to have some wild venison. They were barbecuing it over an open spit. So I could understand quite a bit of French, because he spoke in French. And he asked me if I wanted to ride. He had a very beautiful stable there. So he assigns a beautiful white stallion to me, a gorgeous animal, a beautiful animal, snow white. He signs a black Arabian mare to my sergeant. And they signed an armed goom to us. A goom is an African fighter. He's always stripped to the waist, never takes a bath, and smells horribly. You know, from body odor. They're very huge men. They stand approximately 6'2", 6'3", massive in size, but very devoted to white officers. Very devoted to white officers. So they signed this armed goom with us, and he let off. Well, we kept getting the whiff off of his body, and it was horrible. We were getting sick to the stomach. So we ordered him back to his camp, and he went. So my sergeant and I, we went on our own. There was a small trail that led back to the encampment. It circled a mountain. I don't think the trail was any wider than the width of a wagon, and sheer precipice on the right side. Well, we started at a very gentle lope down the mountainside. The stables were in the town. Now, when a horse smells the stables, that's where he wants to go. So he started to gallop. I didn't know the commands of a French horse. Ho, which means stop for us, is very similar to giddy up in French. Vice versa. So the more we said ho, the faster the horse went. Pretty soon we had a runaways. So I yelled back to my sergeant, drape yourself over the neck of the horse, and you become part of its body. If the horse goes over the precipice, everything goes. So the sergeant draped himself over, as I did, across the neck of the horses, and we became part of them. The horses never broke stride and turned a sharp 90-degree angle in the town, almost threw us off, made another 90-degree angle right, down some stairs into the stables. Well, we got off and we were pretty shaken. The French are always yelling, Vive l'American, and so forth. What they didn't know was the fact that they had two runaways there. And we almost broke our neck. Well, that was one experience. We were ordered back to Ajaccio. Then I was ordered to make my first invasion. My first invasion was Italy. I won't go into particulars there. I was in Pompeii. I saw Mount Vesuvius from a distance. I went all over Pompeii. It was a beautiful place. The excavations, the carvings, and statues and so forth were very beautiful. Like I said before, I have a fine arts background. Having a fine arts background, I could appreciate art. We went up to Naples. The Italians call it Napoli. Again, I could converse with the Italians. Italian, if you listen to it carefully, a lot of the words are very similar to Yiddish, to Jewish. Very similar, and I can always make myself understood. We went through Civitavecchia, which is the port of Rome. We went up to Rome proper. Oh, before we went to Rome, I had a firefight, and we were badly wounded. I had a lot of casualties and the like. I was ordered to go to the town of Grosseto, which is high in the mountain tops of the Italian mountains. That was a rest area. It was a beautiful town, very cozy. At that particular time, Irving Berlin was there. He was putting on a show. A one-day show. So I walked up to Irving Berlin in the morning. By the way, I'm getting goose pimples now. And if you don't believe it, you can feel my skin. It's all full of goose pimples. I get nervous, very nervous. So I introduced myself in the morning, and I said, I am here for a respite and replacement of casualties. He says, I wish you would be my guest. We had lunch together. We had dinner together. It was extremely enlightening. He told me of all of his travels and so forth, the various shows that he had and the like. I stood in the wing, I watched the show, and I really enjoyed myself. Then we went up into Rome proper. We were stationed in Rome, let's say, for about a period of 2 weeks. Well, I took over 2 chateaus on top of the cliffs on north of Rome, on the north side of Rome. It overlooked the Vatican. Beautiful chateaus, very expensive ones. The officers took one, they enlisted in another. We never stole anything, never. As for the enlisted men, naturally, you know, being wild as they were, there was some vandalism there. They broke things and so forth. And I just couldn't stop it. I went into the Vatican proper, and I toured all of it. They call it the Vatican City. It was a very beautiful place, extremely beautiful. Mosaics, art, statues. And again, I can appreciate all that art. Excuse me. I went to the Colosseum. I was all over the Colosseum. That's where the Romans butchered the Christians and the Jews. I toured all of Rome. I had a very glorious time there. We went up to Venice and Florence. That's as far as you went up in Italy. Again, they pulled me off it back to Naples. At that particular time, I was with the Fifth Army. General Mark Clark, he was a 3-star general. I was assigned to the 7th Army, 6th Corps. An army has a total of 4 corps, a service corps and 3 fighter corps. My second invasion was at Saint-Tropez, the home of Brigade Bardot. Again, we landed with a firefight. Approximately 10 miles from us, an entire regiment was destroyed to a man. They were landing in a cove on an LST, with tanks and so forth. And they had a German division entrenched in the hills in a circular form. And they wiped out that entire force to a man. There wasn't a thing living. There was an ammunition depot there. I was ordered with my men with trucks and shovels to go to that ammunition depot. It was supposed to have been serviced by 40 Italians and 1 Frenchman. Everything was in shambles there. I saw a man burning inside of a cab of a truck, and we couldn't save him. There were explosions all over. We were picking up pieces of body and the like. A shoe here, a hand there, and so forth. Loading them in the trucks, so we could bury them. It was a horrible sight. We went back to our camp, and for all day, we were all sick to our stomach, for which you couldn't blame us. While at while at Saint-Tropez, I took 5 leaves. I went into Marseille, which is a big port. We used to go into bars, and we'd have a few drinks, and we'd see some dances there and so forth. The women used to dance in nude on top of the bars. It was funny. It didn't bother us much. I took about 5 leaves. I went into Cannes-en-Nice, which is the French Riviera. One of the leaves was with all the Jewish troops in that area. I was to be the commander. It was the time of the high holidays. So we went to Cannes and we stopped at Nice. The officers were assigned a small hotel. The enlisted men were assigned a larger hotel, all near the synagogue. Right across the street were a bunch of Jewish women. They lived upstairs. No men, only women, Jewish women and children. One day when I was there, a bunch of them come running down the stairs, got on their knees, carrying handfuls of money, and said, "Give him a lesson, give him a lesson, give him a lesson," pleading. It's against Army regulation to part with anything military. And I could have been in a court-martial. But despite that fact, I gave them most of our supplies. They wanted to pay for it, and I says, "No pay." I got replenished at the supply depot, and that was a very invigorating incident. When I went back to Saint-Tropez, we were ordered inland. As I told you before, I was always very aggressive, always taking chances. So I didn't take the ground pass through the mountains, or what they call the lowlands. I bet another officer $1,000 that I could snake the convoy over the Alps like Hannibal did, with his elephants. So I got a American construction company that had all the equipment, for building and the like. And I offered the officer $1,000 that I was to win if he would tag along with me and build the bridges across the fords. He would fill logs, and this is the truth. He would fill logs and so forth, and we used to build little bridges across the fords. I remember, I think we built approximately about 3 of them. When we crossed the Alps, we were at Lyon, France. Lyon, France is a very famous city in France. It's a silk center of Europe. From there we went to a place called Chantetil-de-la-Valbonne. By the way, I have a very excellent memory. A very, very excellent memory. That dates as far back as my childhood. I just don't forget. So we landed at a place called Chantetil-de-la-Valbonne. The Valbonne River is a river about the same size as the Rhine River, same width. It has a current of only 8 miles an hour, while the Rhine River has a current of 9 miles an hour. Again, we practiced the Rhine River crossing. So wait a minute. I gotta think. After all, it's been 55 years. Oh yeah. All right. The invasion of France. Well, that was my third invasion. After all, the Germans had all of Paris. They had all the major cities and the like, and we had to drive them out, which we did. I took 5 leaves. I went into Paris proper. I was at the Casino de Paris, which is like the Folies Bergère. I was in the Cathedral of Notre Dame. Like I told you before, I love art. Again, I have pictures of the cathedral, both inside and out. We went up to the Arc de Triomphe. Well, let me put it this way. We were all over Paris. I had a Jeep stolen once in Paris. My sergeant, who was supposed to take the rotor out, you know, when he chased girls, he didn't take the rotor out this time. So my Jeep and trailer was stolen. I was afraid I was going to have to pay for a trailer and a Jeep. There was a Colonel Gardus there, whom I used to play high stakes poker with. And when I say high stakes poker, I mean high stakes, because I always walked around with $8,000 or $10,000 on me. I was a good poker player, a very good poker player. So we used to play poker together, Colonel Gardus, and he took pity on me. He wrote off the Jeep and trailer as a battle loss. And as a result, I was able to get a new trailer and Jeep. And it didn't cost me a dime. When we played this high stakes poker, there was a Colonel Gardus, Major Nesbitt, there was a Captain Morey, there was a medical officer, and there was a one-star general. It was a very interesting game. He used to play what they call table stakes. With a table stake, you could bet the size of the pot. And sometimes the pot would be $2,000, $3,000. No problem. But again, I was fairly lucky and I won most of the time. I used to send home thousands of dollars to Rose. And Rose would never spend it. Never spend it. And always went into the bank. Rose worked for the Railroad Retirement Board at that particular time, which is a government agency, and she had a good job. So, as a result, when I got home, I was loaded. Once I was approximately 60 miles ahead of 7th Army headquarters, and I got a telephone call. Abrams, get your Fanny back to headquarters. We're going to have an all-night poker game. So they keep a cook up all night, and he waits on us. While going to 7th Army headquarters, you travel the Autobahn, which is their superhighway. It puts our highways to shame. They are gorgeous highways, very well kept, not patched like ours. When they make a patch, it's a complete concrete patch, not with asphalt. They used to hide planes under the trees, pursuit ships, and they used to take off using the Autobahn as a landing strip. And it was very effective. Again, I have photographs of this. While traveling to 7th Army headquarters, there was a excuse me, there was a group of Nazi teenagers. They wore the brown uniform, and they had the armband on and the like. They were headed by a grown young man, and he had the swastika as an armband. And they were throwing tacks on the road. Well, naturally, if you have the Autobahn, which is a high-speed highway, and if you hit those tacks and you get a flat tire, you get thrown, you get killed. And that was their intention. When I saw them do that, I stopped, had my driver stop my Jeep. I went over to the leader, and I says, "Was ist los?" which means, what is it? And he said, "Nicht verstehen," which means I don't understand. Well, I grabbed a stock of my carbine. I grabbed the barrel and I hit him across his leg. And I broke the stock on him. He would have to be a cripple. The young boys ran, and that was it. Well, we cleaned tacks off the highway because I didn't want anyone else to get a flat tire. And then we went on into 7th Army headquarters for the poker game. I was all over Grenoble, Alsace-Lorraine. I broke a bone in my left foot. And I refused to go to the medical authorities in order to get it taken care of, even though there was a hospital nearby. Because I knew if I went there, my troops were moving up and I wanted to be with them. So I had my medic wrap my left foot very tightly because I had a break in it, in a bone. Then we put on the boot and we laced that tightly. My men got me a stick, which I made a cane out of, and I walked in that for a full week. It was very painful. I could endure a lot of pain, and I still do. My left foot started to swell very, very badly. Gangrene was starting to set in. So they had to cut off the boot. I went to the medics. They treated it. And I took over a small town in Alsace-Lorraine. It was right at the time of Christmas time. Again, I have photographs of all this. I took over a small house on a hill overlooking a town. It had a white picket fence around it. It was a beautiful little house. We threw a party, you know, for the Frenchmen, because after all, we drove out the Germans. So we got all of the wine, liquor, candy, ice cream, candy, gum, and the like, and we threw a party for them. Oh, I take it back. We didn't have the ice cream. So they thanked us. Again, I have photographs of all this. I gotta take a break.